Hi, I'm Gary and welcome to my shop. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the WorkSharp 3000 WorkSharpener workstation. Now this is not a review of the WorkSharp 3000, but about the workstation that I mounted it to. Now I'll put some links on the screen and in the description below. Now this workstation is from the plans from Stumpy Nubs. See his YouTube video at this link. He sells his plans for $5 at this link. Now I bought the plans and made a few modifications to suit my needs. You can modify it as it suits yours. This is my third build of this workstation, so to see build number 2, see it at this link. Now I reversed Stumpy's layout so I could, number 1, be able to use the see-through sharpening disc for sharpening lathe chisels at this point here. You can take your lathe chisel, especially the round ones, and you can see through that, as you've seen in other videos that demonstrate how this works, and it works pretty good. And number 2 is I also use the WorkSharp toolbar, which is now discontinued because of lack of sales, but I'll give you some alternatives below. Now this toolbar mounts up here, and you can adjust the height up and down, swivel it in and out, and a lot of Tormek adapters and jigs will fit onto this toolbar. So it's a very handy deal. So I had to use this orientation to use this attachment also. Now number 3, I didn't make the disc section entirely for discs, and I added another drawer. That's based on my use at the time. I just didn't need that many disc slots. Now the reason I'm modifying this a third time is because I need more disc slots to accommodate the additional see-through discs that I'm using now. As a result, I'll make the drawer beneath them a little smaller, and maybe I'll make the 2 drawers on the bottom all one drawer. Now, number 2 is where I can, I'll use some 1/2" MDF to lighten up the weight of this workstation. Since I don't leave it in one location all the time, I move it on and off the shelf to my workbench and then back again. I have a small shop. And number 3, I will be adding a wide blade attachment to get a better level alignment with the top of the sanding disc up here. Now the WorkSharp wide blade attachment provides 4 set screws, so I can line that up to be good and level and straight with the sanding disc. Now the $20 jet sharpening system bar extension, as in Stumpy's video, appears to have been discontinued also. I can't seem to find that anywhere. Now be sure to read the description below, as it will contain additional information and links. Also, any corrections and updates will be listed there. So I will show you how I do this. Now in the course of this video, this turned out to be a lot longer than I was expecting it to. I was going to show you some procedures and techniques of how I use various sharpening techniques and various jigs. But with as long as this is, I'm not really going to add this into this. I'll make that a separate video for the future. This is my 3/4 inch thick material that I'm using for doing the base portion of this workstation. From right to left, I've got the bottom piece that's 22 3/4 by 7.5 inches. And I've marked out these cuts to be about 1/4 inch larger to give me room for making the cuts without getting it too close. These are rough cuts, and then I will finesse them as I got them into smaller pieces to work with. The next one to the left is going to be the top board. Then the next to the left on the bottom is the disc tower left side base. And then above that is the disc tower right side board. Then to the left of that is the side for the right side of the base. And I drew in 2 of these there, but you can ignore 1 because it only requires 1 on this. Now these cuts are for the base of this workstation. I will make this picture available in the PDF of my plans and sketches. Now if you can get these cuts from scrap materials that you have on hand, that will save you some money. I will make more cuts from some 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch materials for the parts, and I'll show you as I work through those parts. I will also be making some groove, Dado, and Rabbit cuts for the disc slots and the back panels of the cabinet. Other joints are going to be basic butt joints with screws and glue. I'm not going to get real fancy for a shop fixture where simple joints will hold up as well. To follow along with me, I suggest that you buy Stumpy's plans and download my plans and sketches of my modifications available at the link in the description below. Okay, so I've got my major pieces cut, and this is how they'll go together. So my next step is to make some dados, putting this together. So I've got all these boards cut to the sizes that I needed, And now I'm going to do is start cutting my dados on these boards for doing the assembly. Now this is the part that is the left side on the bottom part, and my board's going to come across and go into this dado here. So I'm going to make this 3/8 of an inch deep. To make this easy, rather than setting up a stacked dado and everything, I've got this micro jig match fit jig that I'm going to use that really gives me some great results. Nice, good, tight fit. There's a lot of videos out there on how to set this up. This will be shorter and faster than setting up a dado stack. So as you can see, this gives me a perfect fit. I have another board that I need to cut on the top here. I'm going to cut at 1/4 inch deep when I do this one. Okay, as you can see, I've got this assembly together here. Got this one board at this end. Those will be butt joints here. And then this board here, which goes into this end. And this will get me this level across here. Next, I'm going to measure in precisely from this edge here to the width that I need. I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch deep dado in here so I can put this other side in that'll be holding all the disc slots. Now the reason I only go 1/4 inch deep on this one is because of this expanse here and the weight it's going to be carrying. I don't want to take too much strength out of that. Okay, so now I'll do out this shallow 1/4 inch deep, 3/4 wide dado. See all this all goes together. Once I get all these joints together and glued and screwed. So you can see I got this piece in here. This will give me a good level top here. Then my discs will fit in here as I'll put the different trays or slots across here so I can stack up all these discs. Good. Now what I'm going to do is to make 1/4 inch grooves on the insides of these. So I decided that I can use my micro jig match fit dado stop here to cut these dados I need on the insides of these boards here. That'll be part of that upright tower that will hold all my different discs in it. So what I can do is I match these up, the lines, and I also drew arrows at the tops here because these are the ends that are going to go up against the jig here so I can get the correct alignment. So I've got this set up with a scrap piece of material that I'm going to use for making those shelves, and got it set up to 0 in the width of the dado that I'm going to need, and I've got my blade height set to 1/4 inch. Now, since I'm starting these out at 1 inch from the top here down, then I'm starting to do my dados, then it'll be 3/4, then 1/4 inch dado, 3/4, 1/4 inch dado, so on. I have to set this at 4 inches to get this 1 inch stop here. My fence at 4 inches to give me this 1 inch that I need before I start cutting the dado. And I readjusted my fence here so it just barely registers against this number 2 leg on this jig. Then I will take my pieces. I can take them one at a time instead of doing them in one length. I'm going to make these dados for the boards that are going to go in there for supporting it. And I've got my arrow pointing to my fence here, so this is the end. I'm going to register against my jig for making these cuts. Okay, so I've got my groove there, and my piece fits in well. That'll be great. I'll do the rest of the slots the same way. As you can see here, I've made my dados for all these shelves to go into here, and I cut them up to fit in there. Right now this is all dry fitting, and once everything is lining up correctly, then I'll put the glue on and start clamping. A few more things to do yet is I'm going to have to cut some half-shaped holes in here so I can reach in and get a grasp on these discs and pull them out with my fingers. This bottom one here, if I've got these slotted discs on there, those will be easy to grab through the opening that I'll have on that shelf. Then I'll be putting a top across here, putting the machine on here, then I'll level this up in the machine with that wide blade attachment that gives us a level surface. Then on the back side of this, As you can see, this is indented quite a ways. These discs are only 6-inch, so I limited the shelves to come back only 6 inches because I don't want the disc to go in so far that I can't get them out. So what I'm going to do is make some rabbets here to put a piece in so I can make like a back wall against this so the disc won't slide through too far on me. That'll be some of my next steps, along with lining up the screw holes for mounting this in and then making a drawer to fit this entire expanse. Okay, what I'm going to do next is to work on cutting out the dados back here, put a backer board in for the back of these shelves. And I thought about just using a 1/4 inch, but then I thought, well, got an 1.5 inch space there. If I use a 1/2 inch here, that'll still leave me an inch. Will give me the ability to be able to put screws in to put some of these little tools that came with some of my jigs that I've got, so I can hang them in this cavity back here. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is put in a 1/2 inch backer back here. So it'll give me enough thickness to attach some screws to hang these tools on. So next I'm going to go to the router, route out dados for 1/2 inch so I can put a backer board in there for the back of the shelves. Okay, to cut this dado in here, I want to do a 1/2 inch dado from this line back to put this backer in here for the back of the slots. So I've got my 1/2 inch straight bit cutter in here, and what I'm doing is lining up the cutting edge on this end to be 1.5 inches from my fence so that this dado starts on this line here and goes back. If I measured it from this cutting edge, then I'd be cutting in too far on the wrong side. Now, another thing with this particular board here, since I want to cut this dado this way, and I'm going to have to flip this over and feed it so that I'm going with the bit going this way by going like this and then feeding through. I don't want to cut through much beyond this dado here. So what I'm going to do is line up my bit blades so they're horizontal here to the fence, and then I'll line up this dado to fit over there and slide it up to the fence. Then I can turn on the router and proceed through with the cut. With the other board, I can just stick it on here and feed it through. I don't have to worry about going through this 1/4 inch at the bottom. That's not going to be visible at all. That's how I will route this out. There's my slot for my 1/2 inch backer. As I mentioned, for this one, I'll just run it through. Don't have to worry about the dado or where to stop. Hey, as you can see here, I've cut the dado slots in there to hold this board in place. That just slips right in. That will create a backstop for the shelves. Turn this around, and you can see how the shelf goes in. That stuff stops at that backstop, and that'll keep my disc from sliding in too far and getting beyond my reach. Okay, so I'm going to cut the finger holes here on this, and I've got my center finding ruler here, and I've got it laid out so I've got the same marks on both ends, and I can mark my 0 point here as my center point on this board. Then I will join these two boards together, hold them in place, and then clamp them in place with these clamps here. Then drill the hole. So now I've got those two there like that for my finger grip holes. I'll continue on and do the rest of them. Okay, so I'm still doing all this dry fitting yet. Nothing's glued up yet. And here I've got all the boards in to hold all the discs, and they slide in and out. I've got to glue things yet. All the rest of them you can see I can grab in there. I've got the finger hole here so I can grab these, and holding all my discs. Now, one modification I've decided to do is to make these little ledges here. These are 1/8 inch square dowels that I picked up at Michael's Crafts, because I don't think Home Depot or Lowe's has square dowels this small. And what they'll do is to keep these glass discs, at least, from falling out. If I'm moving this around and tilting it a little bit, I don't want these glass discs to fall out. I don't have these glued in quite yet. But still, I can lift them up and get them out quite easily, and then these will keep them from falling out on me by accident. Next step I'm going to be doing here is to make a rabbet in the back of this here for putting the back in. It's going to be in a 1/2 inch deep because the thickness of this back board is going to be 1/2 inch thick to help give some support here on this, although I don't really think it needs much. Just for good measure, and then I'm going to go in on the rabbet on this depth by 1/4 inch. So I have a 1/4 inch in there, and then it'll be 1/2 inch deep, cover all the inside of that. Yeah, what I'm doing is going around here with this Incra T-roll and marking in for 1/4 inch. Just let my pencil right in there and slide that along as my arm gets in the way. And that gives me the 1/4 inch mark in, and then it'll be going 1/2 inch deep when I set it up on the router bit. Okay, I've gone to the router, cut out the rabbets that I need on all these pieces for putting a back piece on. This is the base, then this is this one side here, then these go together. And we'll sit there. Then, with that together, you'll see how I'll have this opening here to fit a backboard in. This is just a piece of scrap here for right now, and for the corners where the router bit was kind of rounded, I just used my chisel to square up the round edges with that. So this will be perfect fit. And all I have to do is measure out the dimensions that I need to fit this backboard in. Okay, I've cut this backboard here to size to fit into the rabbet that I created there. So this is one more dry assembly. Nothing's glued yet. Also got the backer board in here, all this stuff. Got all the parts put together to make sure I'm getting a good dry fit for testing and make sure everything's lining up correctly. You gotta have all the parts together to see if anything needs to be tweaked. This is all working out good here. I'm still not ready to glue up yet. What I'm gonna do now is take this apart and figure out where I'm gonna mount the WorkSharp 3000 onto this board. And after I've got everything glued up and assembled, then I'll make the drawer, and then I'll make this top here to line up with the top of the WorkSharp. Okay, so I'm size up this WorkSharp here onto this workstation to see how I can line things up. I had to put this wide blade attachment on here that gives me a flat right across here, and we had checked that as like a straight edge and see if I can go across there without catching, and this does pretty good. It's really pretty close to level, but I'll have to do some further testing and make any alignments that I need to through these adjustment screw holes. So you can see that this here is lower than this, plus I'm gonna have to put a top on here yet, probably at least a 1/2 inch thick top. So what I'm gonna need to do is to raise this WorkSharp up a bit in order to try and get a level there. So that means I'm gonna have to put some spacers underneath the feet of these, and then I'm gonna be marking out the holes that I'm gonna drill for these feet. Another thing to do is to get my alignment here. This side here seems to give me the straightest edge, whereas the other one curves a bit. And so I use this one here to try and eyeball this up to be straight with this edge here, and then far enough in for this bolt hole so I'm not too close to the edge here. Of course, I tried to position it back as far as I can, give me some more space over here to work with. I'll start measuring up and marking up and get ready to get it mounted. Okay, so I have positioned this WorkSharp 3000 on here, got this table tightened on and leveled, and marked out the holes here where I need to drill the holes for the bolts, and measured it carefully to make sure that when my bolts go through, it's going to have clearance space for the head of the bolt, because I'm using these carriage bolts. So I want to make sure I'm in far enough with these so that the heads will clear the 1/2 inch thickness with this backboard so it all goes through okay. Then I will drill some pilot holes. Then I'll take this board off, go to my drill press, and drill the 5/16 hole that I need through there. Well, actually I'll do the Forstner bit first. 3/4 inch Forstner bit to fit the size of the head of this carriage bolt, and I'll go to the depth enough to make the head of this flush with the bottom there. Then from there, with the point that the Forstner bit creates, I'll drill the 5/16 hole so this bolt can come up all the way through there. Okay, so I've got my marks laid out on this board here. This is the one that the WorkSharp's going to sit on. So I've got that, and did a scribe mark as to where I'm going to drill. I'm going to start with drilling a small hole so I can mark the other side. Then I'll flip it over and then come through that Forstner bit deep enough for the head of the carriage bolt. Okay, got those holes drilled. I've got them on this side here, and I'll use these to guide my Forstner bit. Okay, I'm going to use a Forstner bit to make a depression in here, or opening, for the head of the carriage bolt, using a 5/16 bolt, so the head of this is 3/4 inch. That's what I've got in here is a 3/4 Forstner bit. So do that to the depth of the head, so it's even. Okay, got those done up. Next I'll go through these with the 5/16 for the bolt to clear. Okay, I'm going to do the 5/16 holes now for the bolts. that out. So bolt will fit there and set flush once I pound it in and get those square parts to seat in there. So that'll be good. I'll do that for the rest of these. Hey, all set. Got all those done up. Okay, so I've test fitted all my carriage bolts into this for all the different mounting locations, and everything fits in good. So I'll go ahead and get these carriage bolts pressed in there so that they stay flush with the bottom here. Then I have to move up, put spacers underneath here, 1 inch thick. I've measured the distance here between this here and this top one is a 1/2 inch, and if I put another 1/2 inch board on top of this, that means this needs to come up 1 inch altogether. So what I'm going to do is probably take some of this 1/2 inch scrap, cut up a bunch of pieces. 2 of these will bring me up 1 inch underneath each of the feet, and that should get me good and level with where I need to be. Okay, I've got these blocks cut out, cut them 1.5 inch wide this way, 1 inch deep that way, based on how I measured these up with a ruler. And I set these on here and then set the unit on here again, just to test fit again. And got a 1/2 inch board here, because that's going to be what I'll be using. Not this particular one, it's just a piece of scrap for me to try this out with. And I've got some washers that are real thin. They're a AAA at Home Depot. And in the bin there, they were in a bin for 1/4 inch flat washers, but they fit a 5/16 bolt just perfectly. So if I use these as spacing underneath my legs here, I get that on there. This is perfectly flush with the top of this board, and that would bring this up perfectly flush with that. Now, I could finish this up, the final board, just wax it, or, as I've done before, where I've put a piece of laminate on here. You'll see the same laminate on a lot of different things, like my table saw outfeed table and the router table insert I've got here. If I put this on here and it gives me a good slick surface, I'll have to add another washer here, but then this top here will be slightly proud of this laminate here. So the next thing to do is to just use the one washer, then tweak this up a little bit more by using some playing cards as some spacers underneath these feet. And I think that's the way I'll have to go. Well, going up these blocks here for those spacers. It helps keep it on a surface like that. Put the clamp on, then kind of finesse it and get it lined up a bit. So it all comes up square. Good. Okay, I have these pieces glued together here, and I kind of eyeballed and made a center mark on here with my scratch awl to guide my bit. And then I clamped this into the spring clamp here just to make it good and level on here, and it gives me something to hold on to. I like to register the point of the bit on my scribe mark. Get me through. And we got our hole through there. This will be the spacer blocks for raising that WorkSharp unit up. Okay, here I've got this WorkSharp back on this workstation here, and I've got these blocks underneath the feet plus the thin washers, and that raised it up to actually a perfect level with this board here. Now if I add a laminate top on, then that's adding a little bit of a thickness there. And I found that 3 playing cards gets me matching up with this laminate top here. So that's what I'm going to do is I'll cut these up to fit underneath the 4 feet to bring this up to a perfect level. And then that's close enough where I can use these adjustment screws on this plate here to bring it up perfectly level. Okay, so what I did is I took those 3 cards and I cut them up into 4 pieces here. And then I kind of trimmed them a little bit further to fit this block. And then I've got this hole punch. I've got the 3 pieces here and just kind of centrally located that, and this punch doesn't make a large enough hole for 5/16, so I just kind of work around a little bit and enlarged it a little bit because it doesn't have to be real precise. I just want it to be able to get the bolt through it. And then when I put these on the board here, I'm going to put these on the bottom of the block like this, then put it on to the board underneath the feet. Okay, this is the underside of that platform the WorkSharp's going to sit on top of on the other side here. So after doing these recesses here for the heads of the carriage bolts, I need to go in here and kind of clean out a little bit and blow out some of the debris so I've got some good even surfaces on there. Then what I'm going to do is I put it into my vise here. I've got this position so I can set this on here flatly and the bolt can protrude through. And then I'm going to try and line up the flats of the bolt here so they're kind of parallel to the square lines of this board. Then I'll get that positioned in there, and then I will take my punch that I've got here, it's the biggest punch that I've got, and I'll strike this in here to make the square indentations in there so that these bolts get a grasp for when I tighten up the nuts on the other side. So it gives me a square in there. I didn't get it perfectly lined up here, but I will be able to position that in there and get it to fall into place fairly well for me. That'll get a good grasp for when I tighten up the nuts on the other side when this is flipped around and the WorkSharp is on the top part. Okay, I am at kind of like one last point of dry fitting everything. Pretty much got everything assembled here, with the exception that I don't have the drawer in yet, but I'm going to assemble this first and then I'll make the drawer. So I've got the major components and framework together here. It's a dry fit, nothing is glued yet. I want to make sure everything is fitting up well and squarely. Once I put the glue and screws on, that's a commitment. And this is one point where you may decide whether or not you want to finish this. Depending on the part of the country you live in and the humidity that you get from season to season, you may want to finish this because this is MDF, and MDF will absorb moisture from humidity in the air and expand like a sponge. So my next step, I've got all this fitting up pretty well. So next I'm going to do is test and set up all my clamps, make sure I've got all my clamps available for everything that I need to do here. So that'll be my next step to do that, and then doing the gluing and screwing. Okay, to screw these joints here together, I'm going to use a flathead screw. It's 1.25 inches long, and I'm going to use this drill bit. It's a tapered drill bit, and then at the top here it does a taper for the head of the screw. So I've got the length of this set so that the screw head is at the top of this taper, and then this drill bit comes all the way down to near the end of this tip of this screw. I'm going to put 2 screws in here, marked a center line across there, found a center there, and then kind of arbitrarily picked a number halfway between those to locate the other screws. I kind of test the fit to make sure that's enough so that this head sets into there. And I'll do the other butt joints in the same manner. Okay, I've got almost all my butt joints glued and screwed together. This is going to be one last one here, but this is also a piece I'm going to be gluing this joint here and this one at the same time, then getting everything lined up correctly, and then getting it all clamped up. I've already laid out, checked out, and tested my clamping, so I know I've got everything here I need to go. Once I start putting the glue on, don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to apply some glue in this dado here. And to do that, I'm going to kind of tilt this up, make it easier for working with gravity. Get some glue spread into there. Now this being MDF, it is kind of thirsty and it'll soak up a bit of glue, so you may need to add a little extra at times. A little bit more. So I need to put a little bit of glue on this edge here. What I'm going to do is kind of slide this off the edge of my table saw here. Okay, then I'm going to line these up here, put on these clamps. Get them in here a little bit. Get them kind of in there a little bit. Make sure I've got space for these other clamps I'm going to be using. Now these I'm going to put across here. Pull these ends together. So I'm pulling these ends up together. Make sure it's all even. Put the other one on. Everything's all evened up. So now let these clamps sit and let the glue dry. I'm kind of shooting this after the fact here. Thought I had my card and everything on, but I didn't. So basically I stuck this piece in here, this right side for the disc tower. Got that down into that dado there. applied the glue. Then I slipped this backer piece in, got that down, got some glue in the joints there. Then I got the clamps on, hold this piece together onto this, front and back, and then a clamp across this part, keep that good and tight and squared. And then I slipped a piece of this disc tray in here to help make sure that this all stays square. I've got some glue squeeze out here, but after the glue gels a little bit, after about 30 minutes, it'll be a lot easier to scrape that off with a chisel without leaving any residue behind. I will let this dry up, and then I'll move on to the next step, which will be putting this back on for the back of the drawer here. Okay, my next step is I'm going to be gluing this backboard onto the back here for the drawer. This is a good snug fit, but it does fit. What I'm going to do is kind of lay this down, and then I can put this on and tap it into place. As a note, you can see how I hung these adapters for setting up tools for some of the jigs that I have. That cavity in the back part here is a good place to hang those. I'm going to lay this down. Get this in place here. I've test fitted it before, so I'll get some glue in here. Such a tight fit, I'm not going to worry about spreading this out with a glue brush. It's a pretty narrow ledge in there anyway, a 1/4 inch. Okay, good fit. Put a couple of bricks on here for weight. Now, wait for glue to dry again. My next step is I'm going to put these trays in here into this disc tower to hold all this sanding discs, and I'm going to put these in before I put the top on because it just makes it easier to access it without this top on there. And given that these are such a really snug fit, it's not going to take a lot of glue to hold these in place. I'm going to use my Babe Bot, my small glue bot, because these are tight spaces to get into, so this will be a lot easier to get into. I'll get these in here. These will not take a lot of glue to get them in. Now going kind of slowly as I want to line these ends here with this outer edge. Very good. Now, time to let glue dry again. Now, I'm going to set this machine back on top here and start getting it bolted down. See if I can set this on without knocking these bolts through the holes again. Shouldn't be too difficult. Got this one back here. Okay, got that up. And I'll just put on the flat washers and start tightening down the nuts and get it fairly lined up. Then what I'll do is be putting on the top here and getting this lined up with the edge of this table here. Now, it's off a little bit. That's good because of the thickness of that laminate I'm going to put on there. Once I put that on there, then it'll all be good and even. As you may remember, I've got the blocks that raise me 1 inch. I've got a washer underneath the foot here to give me that spacing, and then I got 3 layers of playing cards that I'd cut the size here to tweak my size up to be level on the top here when I put that laminate piece on. That'll give me to a perfect level. Now I'll start tightening down these nuts, and what I do is reach underneath the drawer down here, make sure I hold these heads in place while I tighten these down. Okay, so I've got this unit mounted on here, all the nuts tightened down. Next is to fasten this top on, but before I do that, I'm lining this up here, be all square with everything, and I'm going to check out my laminate. What I want to do is kind of lay this out so that this edge along here is square with this top that I've got on here, and I'll overlap the other ends. And then what I can do is I can go around with my trim router after I've got this glued on and trim around the edges. The only edge I can't trim with the trim router will be this edge. I want to attach this. I may use some screws to attach it, so once I've got those in, then I can put the top on. I can't put the screws in after I put this top on. So I'm going to kind of mark this out here roughly from the underside, cut it a little bit large of that. There I've got a more visible line to see there, so that'll be what I'll cut out. And I'll cut this out a little bit larger than these lines here, and the trim router will take it down to size. So then I'm going to get this glued on here, then fasten with a couple of screws. Then I'll use the contact cement on this and my laminate piece and get that put on. I'll let that glue set up for a little bit, then I'll put some screws on the tops. So I got this top glued onto here, and I've got 4 screws in to hold it in place. Okay, this is the bottom side of that laminate I'm going to put on top of that top surface on there. And I marked it out with a pencil line to mark out the size of that table. And then I darkened this in here with a Sharpie marker. Also made an arrow here to indicate this is the edge that's going to go up against the table on the WorkSharp. So I want to keep that orientation there. This is my straightest edge, and that's where I want to keep it. The rest of these are going to overlap a little bit, and then I can trim it up after I've put it onto the top with a trim router. Okay, I'm going to use a shop scissors here to cut this out. I'll cut out outside the line there, so I've got some excess. Want to be careful working with this so you don't cut your hands. Might be wise to wear some leather gloves. Okay, so I've got that. I'll trim it up a little bit, then prepare the surface down here to make it good and clean so I can apply the contact cement on this and the other table surface. Okay, I'm going to use this Weldwood contact cement, and I just spray it on both surfaces. This is the laminate piece, the good side. This is the back side that gets the glue on it. And then I'll also spray the other surface on the table. Okay, this is the other part, the top. Now I will give this about 15 minutes to dry so it gets to a tacky, and then I can carefully place that laminate piece on top of there. Okay, I've got my top here prepared, my laminate prepared, and I've got my arrow on here indicating my straight edge, which is going to go up against this edge here. So I will very carefully get this placed on there. So I got some overlap everywhere and straight, and press it on. Then I'll use my roller, get this pressed on well. Very good, and got a good level surface here with this table. Gonna work perfect. I'll give this a little time to set up, and then I'll come back with my trim router, trim off the edges here, make it flush. Have my trim router mounted up with a flush trim bit in here. What I'll do is I've got the height adjusted so I can go around this and get it trimmed up flush with the edge of the top. Okay, so now I've got it good and flush around the edges. This one I didn't have to do because that was the straight edge I lined up when I applied it on here. So that's finished. I think one last step for me to be doing yet is the drawer. One of the other things that I did on this new unit here is I took these measurements that I had on here for the planes and chisels for adjusting lengths in this one jig that I've got for using across the top of the WorkSharp for planing the planes and chisels and getting these certain degrees. These are in millimeters. So you go to these certain millimeters to get these certain degree of angle on the end of the chisel. There's also a simpler way by using this port on the chisel also, but if your chisels happen to be a little bit wider than a port, then this is a good alternative to use. Something else I'm going to do is sink a nut into here for setting the knob off the top of the WorkSharp to store it here when not in use. And so I'll do is drill this down with a 1/2-inch Forstner bit to the depth of this knob. Then I'll drill a little bit deeper so I can make sure these threads will seat all the way down. Okay, that's a good depth for the nut. Now I just need to drill a 1/4-inch hole a little bit deeper. Center on that dimple that the Forstner bit made. That should be fine. Now I will epoxy this nut into there, and that'll make for a good place for setting this knob when it's not in use. The epoxy on this nut has dried, and it's holding very securely, so now I can put this knob in. Be a nice place to keep it in between uses because I had a tendency of losing these knobs. As you can see here, I put these handles on each end of this for lifting it around. I just kind of located them in the middle, and as for height for this board here. Another tweak that I added to this is I put this light on here. I got this from Woodcraft online and came with a different mount too and everything, but I just took a piece of this 3/4 inch square bar. These 1/4 inch nuts, fit into these slots behind here. 1/4 inch bolt attaches that there. It seemed to be the easiest way to attach it because this surface is aluminum and it won't stick. So I got that, and it comes off just enough so it clears the table and won't cause any interference. And it's an LED light that shines down here for me, and this is the port where I'm going to do the sharpening from with the see-through disc. So this will give me great illumination for doing that sharpening. Now this operates off of a battery, plus it can also plug into an external power source that it came with. I've got this rubber band on here because the battery door doesn't want to stay on very well. Okay, well, this is pretty much it completed. Got the drawer put in. It's a snug fit, but it works pretty good. I'll wax up the rails a little bit with some wax. This is pretty much butt joints for the drawer because it's not a big drawer and it's not going to carry a lot of load. And I'm not doing any tracks on here because this drawer is too short and they don't make tracks that short. Got all these parts in. Got my jig fixtures here. Pretty much hang my cord on this bolt here for storage when I put it away on a shelf. Now, given the weight that this is, I don't think I've saved any weight compared to the other unit before. So I'm considering I'm going to be building a cabinet that this will sit on as kind of like a permanent fixture. It'll be a cabinet on wheels and with drawers. Okay, here's kind of a post-production note. I decided to put on 2 handles here instead of one in the center because it just makes it a lot easier to keep this from getting out of kilter, which makes it more difficult to open. So with this, with 2 handles, that makes it a lot easier. Also, on the back side, because this is so enclosed and it's a tightly enclosed drawer, I put a couple of holes in here, the 3/4 Forstner bit, to provide some airflow going in and out, and that eases it a lot more too. That makes it a lot easier for the drawer to operate. Okay, so finally got this done. This video turned out to be a lot longer than I was expecting it to be. I also wanted to show you how I sharpen chisels, lathe chisels, and plane blades on this, and with using some of the accessories and jigs that I've got for this. But I'll have to make that a separate video because this is too long already. So I hope you enjoyed this and got the inspiration to make something of your own. If you did, please give me a like and share it with your family, friends, and fellow craftspersons. Also, to see what I may come up with next, please subscribe and be sure to hit that bell icon so you won't miss out on anything. I always appreciate all the comments that I get from you. I get a lot of great ideas from everyone. If the ladies don't find you handsome, at least they should find you handy. Thank you.